everyone, welcome back to the Voice of Dr. Yan. And we've just had a very great conversation with Charles Rixey, who's from the Marine Corps working on CBRNWMD, which means the weapons of massive destructive in America. When people are talking about the pandemic, Dr. Fauci, the NIH director, which is like the godfather of science in US, he is proven to be guilty. So we want to hear from Charles because he's the first to prove it based on the documents that Fauci is guilty. And we want to hear what kind of evidence he can share with us to prove that Dr. Fauci is guilty. And Charles, can you tell our audience that what's the main evidence? I know you have a lot of evidence, but would you need some main evidence to tell the audience why Dr. Fauci is guilty in the pandemic?
Yes. So I think it's best to explain is for people to understand that we spend a lot of time talking about Dr. Fauci and gain of function research and everything, but there's actually, we don't have to know all the answers. So we don't have to know necessarily who made the virus to understand who made the pandemic. And what I mean is that as you know,
it could be stopped, you mean, right?
Right, exactly. We know that whoever made the virus, Dr. Fauci led a response to the virus that was the opposite of what should have done in almost every single way. And that's really been the main project that I've been working on is for the last year is basically compiling evidence to show that whoever made the virus, because we know that it will take a long time to prove unequivocally, you know, whether it was China or the US or combination or whatever, but there are crimes against humanity that occurred that are true regardless of who made the virus. And in particular, the decisions that Dr. Fauci made over a very short span of time in January and in early February of 2020 was those decisions have impacted everything about the pandemic, from how we chose to lock down, the therapeutic drugs that we used, the drugs that we investigated or didn't investigate, the vaccine technologies that we chose and how we implemented them. And all of those things are connected to the fact that Dr. Fauci knew that there were dangerous pieces of things in the viral genome that could not be natural. And instead of warning the world about that, he intentionally, and we know this because, I mean, we just have massive evidence, and it all happened right one after another, but he intentionally chose to hide how transmissible the virus was and the connections to other viruses which impacted the types of drugs that could be used. And I don't know why he did these things, but I do know that he did them on purpose. And that's the evidence. In fact, myself, Andrew Huff, Kevin McCairn, who's a neuroscientist that I've worked with, he's an expert in neurodegenerative diseases and prions.
Kevin is also on the Twitter, right?
Yeah. Yes, Kevin is. He's very, very intelligent in the amyloid and prion disorders of the brain. And
Wow,
also
then you should tell him, maybe I should insert some important intelligence to you and to our audience. You should let Kevin know that China's been very, very interested into this kind of amyloid and prone disease. And
really,
yes, and they have already managed to obtain a lot of the samples, intellectual properties from your top universities, which I can't tell the name in public yet. But if Kevin and also other intelligence community are interested into this, I could get some extra conversation with them, with you. I mean, yes, because China believes this would be an easy way to, damage one person's the target's brain, and the neural system is always what they focus on. And one of the reasons China chose SARS-CoV to COVID-19 virus is because when the People's Liberation Army, Wang Changjun's team in Nanjing discovered the bad coronavirus ZC45 and ZXC21, as in my reports, these people have done a very important research on this bad coronavirus, and they realized this bad coronavirus has a very good capacity potentially infect the mammal's brain. They use the rat baby to do the test, and that's what they show in their article. And that becomes the very important reason that they use this one to create SARS-CoV-2, because that could get more capacity as a weaponized virus. Please continue.
Wow, that is incredibly important. And I'm very glad that you pointed that out, because Kevin he was the first, and he worked with Luc Montagnier and Walter Chestnut and Jean to really dig into that. And so Kevin was one of the first to really warn about that. And one of the other, because there's five of us who are we're going to be submitting evidence for under oath for potential the start of a legal proceeding, and so Kevin is one of those who's involved in that. I'm one of them. Joanna Deinert, who is from Germany, she's a German doctor, and she was also has a lot of experience and understanding of biological weapons. And then Richard Fleming, which I don't know if...
Dr. Fleming has cited my first report in his book.
Yes, and so Dr. Fleming, we kind of met each other, but then we also got connected with him, and also Andrew Huff from EcoHealth Alliance. The five of us are working right now on putting stuff together. And so what you just said is, I think it's very important, and I will be talking, because I do think that Kevin should talk to you, because he has seen this, and he and I have argued that this propensity, this high probability of causing misfolded proteins, or just amyloid formation in general, it looked to him from the very beginning that it was weaponized, that it was done on purpose, and that it was part of, it was yet another thing that could be, it's just one more impact on your health that makes this a long-term, very impactful, very debilitating virus.
So may I know that?
Well, I would say that the military was always more open to the possibility of a bioweapon, but for me, it's hard to know for sure. Today, 3 years later, I would say 75% of Americans are completely aware. They don't understand the science, but they understand that something wrong happened. It was not supposed to be that way. And they understand that Fauci was not being honest with them. However, because the censorship was so, well, I actually feel bad saying this, because I know that in China, its censorship is
common,
far and above anything that we have here. But for Americans, we did not expect, and so we didn't, like even at first, I didn't know, I didn't know that certain things were being censored. I just assumed that they were being honest, like you assumed. And we were all of us were shocked to discover that they weren't telling us the truth. And I think well, that's done several things, but one thing that it's done is it's caused the public around the world to lose trust in scientists and in doctors.
And mainstream media.
Nobody trusted the media, but the fact that they would, like, when I talk to people now, and this includes me, I've had conversations where I tell people if I get sick, I don't know that I want to go to the doctor. Sure. Because I don't want to be admitted to the hospital, because the hospital systems and everybody became so entrenched in doing whatever Fauci said that they allowed countless people to die simply by not using good medical judgment.
Yes.
And it's horrific. And all of that ties back to Dr. Fauci, because he basically set the tone for the entire Western world. And it's horrific. I wish I had a better way to explain it, but because he censored these specific things, he censored anything that was linked. He wouldn't tell us about furin, and furin is a problem because furin is what drives this immune suppression and these higher cancer rates and these higher amyloid disease rates, and so all of these things tie back to him not wanting to be honest about what they were doing.
In 2019, I remember the avian influenza, the high pathogenic avian influenza H5N1, one of the most famous gain of function experiment conducted in US in the University of Wisconsin, restarted under certain restriction. So that is the beginning of the new gain of function experiment allowed by the scientific field. And also what else happened? If you say from 2018 to 2020, there are more Chinese scientists, especially the one who have military background. They get into the American, the Academy of Science, Academy of Medicine, Academy of Microbiology, because I work with those kind of scientists, like my ex-boss, Madik Paris, who Dr. Fauci respect, listen to his all coronavirus ideas, that he's a such celebrity. He became the foreign member of American Academy of Science. And soon after, he brought China CDC Director George Fugao in. And Batwoman Shi Zhenli came in after that. And also, there are so many. Batman Lin Fa Wang, based in Australia, now in Singapore. These people all deeply get involved into the development of COVID-19 and even more potential novel bioweapons. But now they are in this American scientific field. The network is already extended, and Dr. Fauci definitely have more kind of connection with them in those 2 years. And the things become, as I feel, wow, really, as how these scientists in China plan to do. And definitely those people doing it gave this kind of suggestion, made it happen, because those are what the Chinese Communist Party, and especially the chairman Xi Jinping, what they want. So that's why these people made it happen. And later, when we see the outbreak, I would say that outbreak is kind of out of control, because I don't think they want in Wuhan get such big outbreak, but definitely when they release it out of the lab, they have their special purpose in the community. So when we see it happened, although a little bit mistake happened, caused the Wuhan outbreak, but they quickly take the advantage and spread it all over the world. And how could the whole scientific world under Fauci become so quickly coordinated with them? So when we see combine the document you discovered in English and the documents I discovered in Chinese, I would say we now can have more pieces of the whole puzzle, right?
There's so much evidence. It's hard to imagine that they could have gotten away with it, except the only way I think they were able to is because Dr. Fauci was placed in the exact position where he controls who gets into the academies. And what that means is that even now, as the pandemic has been going on, anybody that wanted to investigate the origin was not going to receive funding for it. And
sure.
So you wouldn't get funding, and then they control the academies. At the end of your career, you're not going to be rewarded with being
I know
academy.
one of the scientists.
All these things, yes, all these things that they've done, they pick and choose based upon what they want or don't want to be published. And anybody that stands up and says, no, look at this because something is wrong, they do so knowing that until this structure is taken away, they're not going to get funding, they're not going to get promoted, they're not going to have the impact that they would otherwise have because they control all aspects of it. And yes, and the evidence is all there, but we never knew that this was happening like this. And
basically like disappeared in the academic field. Fauci has this kind of power to disappear you, especially when he has so much allies, campaigns, and especially China government would provide support.
That's a great word for it, because I know that's like a Chinese thing, that somebody disappearing for a while,
yes,
or permanently, but it's almost like Fauci learned from the Chinese way of doing things, because that's very much how they've been able to structure it.
We can see that our time run out now, but I still very enjoy the conversation with you. First, I want to say definitely we can continue conversation in
Absolutely.
the future episodes, and you can come to update your understanding and your outcomes. And also I want to say Fauci definitely at that time feel that what Chinese government can do is so attractive. That means give you almost absolute power immediately overnight. You just from the scientist, a doctor, become a king of the world, and it's a king of America and the king of the scientific world. This kind of power can make people like the drug addiction.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So he can't give it up. And also, I'm not sure whether Americans know that actually Chinese government using Fauci in a traditional Soviet Union style. Initially, elite capture you as an elite and use you, and then throw you under the bus as a useful idiot. Maybe you still say in English media that those people help China still said, oh, you should listen to Fauci, and Fauci is nonsense. But let me tell you an interesting thing, that even back to 2020, when U.S. tried to talk about the origin investigation, and when American people little by little start to question the policies in America anti-COVID, China government start to say Fauci is a bad guy, and America making the bioweapon for Fauci, and American government guilty. They should be responsible for the deaths in China. Fauci, I really don't know whether someone have translated these things to him, because once we touch the origin of COVID, if Fauci still think he insists on nature origin, praising China government, and he would continue get support, he is wrong. China will even create more evidence or release more evidence to throw him to the jail.
I think we're on the same page that there's a lot of bad things have happened, and there's bad people in China, there's bad people in the US.
Yes.
And
we need to
expose them, yeah.
Fight together. We need to send them to the trial. And thank you so much, Charles.